Welcome back to Shadow to Soul. I'm your host, Darshni. Today's episode is the beginning of everything for me. It's the story of the day I walked in to my very first regression therapy session, terrified, exhausted, and convinced I was failing as a mother. This wasn't a moment of clarity or confidence. It was a moment of absolute desperation. But ultimately, this was also the day that led me onto the path I'm walking today. Rock bottom doesn't make a big announcement when it comes. It is silent and it's quite sneaky. Mine came without drama or distraction. For nearly 2 years, I had been drowning slowly, functioning from outside because I had to, just surviving. But internally, I was breaking piece by piece. I was coping, but I wasn't okay. And then came the moment with my son, the moment that truly broke me. For the first time in my life, I saw myself outside of my body doing something that broke my heart. I immediately grabbed my phone and booked an appointment with a regression therapist. There was no thought that went into the process of making a decision to book the appointment. I didn't think about what it would involve. I didn't think about having to share my deepest truths, having to step completely out of my comfort zone. I didn't think, I just acted. I knew I'd reached the end of something, but I was ready to stop drowning now. On the day of the appointment, when I went to see Kinnery, climbing up the stairs, I was already in panic. My heart was racing. I was sweating. I've never been one to talk about myself, to share my problems, my struggles, my feelings, my inner world. Not even with friends. And not because I didn't have good friends. It was just not something that I was comfortable doing. For as long as I can remember, I've always dealt with things on my own. I wasn't used to being vulnerable, and being here was pushing me far beyond my comfort zone. What kept me going was the look on my son's face, that look of pure shock because of me, and the knowing that he deserved better than what I had been giving him up till now. So I sat down, tried to get comfortable. Then Kinnery asked me the question that I absolutely should have expected. Why are you here? And for a moment, I froze. I didn't realize until that moment just how difficult it was for me to talk about myself. Eventually, I said, I'm a bad mother and my son deserves better. I've been going through hell and he's paying the price for it. And that has to stop. She then began asking me questions about my life, my childhood, my relationships, my marriage, my current situation. And as I spoke, I began to cry. I was not able to control my tears. As I talked about the things that had happened to me, my default response was to say, but it's okay, because I felt guilty talking about the people I loved, guilty for sharing that they caused me pain, guilty for feeling anything negative about them. Then Kinnery said something that changed everything for me. She said, it's okay. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to be upset. It's okay to feel whatever it is that you're feeling. And whatever happened, it wasn't okay. And something inside me just gave way. I started bawling. I hadn't cried like that in front of anyone, ever. The last time I recall crying before that was 2 days postpartum at the hospital. And even that wasn't this outright stomach clenching, bawling, being given permission to say that I wasn't okay with my childhood without judgment, but without judgment of the people that I loved as well, was deeply liberating. For the first time, I stopped rationalizing. I stopped explaining things away, and I stopped defending everyone. I just started speaking from my own experience, my own truth. To be able to say all those things aloud to someone without judgment, but to have that space to feel safe to say it, to have that space to cry the way that I did, was incredibly cathartic. It was absolutely what I needed in that moment. I told her about my family. I have an older sister. She's 2 years older than me, and she's been diabetic my whole life. She was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when she was only 18 months old, and that was early 1981. At that time, especially in Kenya, this was extremely uncommon. In fact, my parents didn't know of anyone else who was going through the same thing. My sister needed daily injections, which my mom, would have to administer. Her food had to be regulated. There were constant restrictions. My parents were learning how to live with this, how to keep their daughter alive. And of course, my sister, 18 months old. What could she possibly have understood about what was happening to her? At the time, we lived in a large family home with my grandparents, my dad's brothers and their families. And when everyone learned of this diagnosis, they all rallied together to support my parents and my sister. Like, sugary stuff was removed from the house. Life adjusted around her needs. When I was born, my parents were still learning how to manage this condition for my sister and manage it with her. I was born healthy, thankfully. Growing up, my sister needed my parents more than I did. And somewhere along the way, I learned to become the easier one, the quiet one, the one who did what she was told to do, the one who didn't add to the load. From as young as I can remember, my sister and I did not get along. We constantly fought. I felt she absolutely hated me. That only really changed many years later when we started living in different countries. There were many other details that I shared in that appointment. And over the course of the season, I'll share more as and when they feel relevant. But there are two things specifically I told Kinneri when she asked me about my health that I feel I need to mention here. The first was my menstrual cycle. I got my first period when I was 11. And from then on, I would get a period once a year, maybe twice. I'd had every test done, blood work, scans, hormonal profile. Doctors suspected things like PCOS, thyroid issues, but nothing ever came back conclusively. The only finding was a slightly smaller left ovary, still fully functioning and not considered a medical explanation at the time. So it was noted and then dismissed. But I'd always known there was a reason. And this was one of those things that when I read the book, Many Lives, Many Masters, I knew the reason for this I would find within regression therapy. The second thing was lactose intolerance. During my third trimester of pregnancy, I developed it, which is fairly common, and it disappeared after giving birth. Then about a year later, it came back with a vengeance. What felt strange about it was that I was intolerant to milk, butter, ice cream, but I could eat cheese, I could eat cakes, biscuits, I could eat food that had been cooked with butter. I could eat croissants. Once again, there was no clear medical explanation for it. It was just one of those things. And regarding this, I really didn't think much of it. I kind of just took it as, okay, maybe this is how it is, and this is what lactose intolerance is. After going through my history, after letting me talk as much as I needed to, Kinnary suggested we try hypnosis. She said that it was important I experience a trance for the regression therapy going forward. And I panicked. The idea of giving up control, even though I was reassured, felt so daunting. Control had always been my safety net. Then immediately after, another fear crept in. What if this didn't work? What if I couldn't be hypnotized? I've always known that I had a strong mind. I absolutely don't lose control easily. I've never gotten drunk where I have lost any kind of control, even when I've had a lot to drink, more than I normally ever would. If I ever got a little lightheaded, I would talk myself out of it. And I wouldn't have to stop drinking. I would just snap out of it, knowing I did not like that feeling. Sensing my anxiety, though, she reassured me. And she said, today isn't about doing anything big. It was just about experiencing what it felt like to be in a deeper trance, just how comfortable it was. And she reassured me again that if at any point I wanted to stop, I absolutely would be able to. I would not lose any kind of control where I would feel uncomfortable. So despite my nervousness, despite all the doubt, I realized how much I wanted this to work. I did not want this to fail. So to begin, she guided me through a progressive relaxation. It was slow, gentle, layer by layer. And I remember still having thoughts throughout, but at the same time also gradually feeling more relaxed. And then something shifted when she asked me to focus on the point between my eyebrows, my third eye. I began to see images in my mind's eye. I was in a vast white space. It was weightless, luminous, expansive. There were beings all around me, two that were familiar and divine, and many others who were unknown. They weren't doing anything in particular. They were simply present. Some were sitting still, others moving around, just existing, I guess would be the best way to say it, just being present. And more than what I saw, it was what I felt in that space that changed things for me. There was a peace that was so absolute, it wasn't human, and a love so complete, it felt like being held by the universe itself. This was not something I tried to imagine. It arose on its own, of its own accord, and it felt more real than any thought. It wasn't a story, it wasn't a past life. It was a place I had never consciously experienced. Yet, there was something so familiar. The feeling felt like home. In that space, there was no fear, no pain, no chaos, only peace, only love. The two things that had been missing entirely from my life. Not just at that time, but always. In another part of my awareness, I was fully conscious of my life. I knew everything that had happened. I knew why I was there and everything that was, I guess, still happening. And yet, even with that awareness, even when I focused on it in that space, the peace and the love did not fade at all. And I believe it was in that moment that I recognized something fundamental, something my soul already knew. Circumstances do not dictate what we feel. Even with a painful, chaotic life, there's peace and love beneath it. because that's where everything begins and where it returns. Surrendering to life rather than resisting it, living in acceptance rather than defense. This state of peace, this wholeness, is not unreachable. It is absolutely possible. Its presence isn't governed by what happens to us, but by how we choose to meet life. My soul had finally shown me what I'd been searching for my entire life. And more than that, it showed me that this state of peace and love was attainable. It was well within reach. I understood then, without really knowing what regression therapy was, that it was about finding myself in a place where I'm able to choose to live from this place more often, to choose peace, to choose love. In the next episode, I'll take you into the first timeline that surfaced, a story that explained the fear, guilt, and the deep emotional patterns that had been quietly running my life. This was the beginning of my rebirth. And if you've ever felt lost, overwhelmed, or disconnected from who you really are, maybe this is the beginning of yours too. Before you move on with your day, I'd invite you to pause for a moment. Just notice what came up for you while listening. Any feeling, any memory, any bodily sensations. You don't need to analyze it or make sense of it. Just notice it. And that noticing can be where healing begins. Thank you for listening. Until next time, from shadow to soul.